Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with Phil News and broadcaster and commentator Matt Stadlen. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the stabbings on a train in Cambridgeshire that left a number of people seriously injured is the top story in The Guardian, which focuses on the heroics of one LNER rail worker badly hurt while trying to stop the attacker. The Express says police believe the man saved many lives by his brave actions. According to The Telegraph, the attacker shouted, "The devil's not going to win," at people on the train as he was stabbing his victims. That's also the main angle for the Mirror's front page. The Mail too has a similar front page headline. This is the Sun's front page, meanwhile, "Devil on the 625." While the Star speaks to a passenger who says she was spared by the attacker during the rampage. The Eye says that as a result, police will now be patrolling trains on the East Coast Main Line and some major cities. The Metro leads with a warning from experts that some high street clinic scans for pregnant women are unsafe, with illnesses reportedly misdiagnosed and even healthy unborn babies being declared dead. The Financial Times says city executives are worried that the national minimum wage is now getting close to the starting salaries paid to graduates, which could impact how they hire staff in future. So, welcome to our reviewers tonight, Phil Rosenberg and Matt Stadlen. Good to see you both. Let us start with The Guardian and the top story today. We were on air when this news broke last night, and that is the mass stabbings on the train at Huntingdon Station. The train actually had to divert. It wasn't scheduled to actually stop at that station, but because of the quick thinking of the driver, diverted. And the Guardian looking at the heroic actions of a rail worker who put himself in between passengers and the attacker. Matt?
It's just a very upsetting and shocking story, and many will have come across it first. I'm sure on Sky News yesterday I came across it first this morning, and you just immediately think of all those who've been affected and their friends and families as well. But amidst the horror, some heroism has emerged. Two principal figures involved. One, an LNER staff member, as you say, who's in a life-threatening condition, putting themselves between the attacker and a potential victim. And that just sort of makes you wonder, it makes me wonder anyway, when you hear of this sort of heroism, what would you do? And I'm sure people will be asking themselves that very question. And then, as I'm sure we'll go on to in a moment on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, a war veteran driver who was quick thinking enough to divert the train, which was supposed to be going to London, to Huntingdon in Cambridgeshire, as you say, and that very possibly saved lives.
Yes, heroic actions from both, but terrifying experience for all those on the train, Phil.
Absolutely. You know, you take these train journeys and it's the most normal thing in the world. So the idea that you're in this enclosed space and suddenly this person is on a stabbing rampage, it's it's terrifying. And to hear that there were these acts of heroism, that's one of those things that you find from these really difficult moments. People who put themselves in harm's way, and of course we pray for the recovery of the LNER worker who's done that. That's an incredible thing. And also this train driver who had the quick thinking to divert to Huntingdon, where it was quicker emergency services response. And that was a very quick response, I'm sure, that saved many lives. And a war veteran who was just a few days before handing out poppies at his local supermarket. So that's quite an incredible thing.
Yes, that's
He's been working. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say Andrew Johnson, just to name him, 17 years in the Royal Navy. He'd been deployed to Iraq in 2003, bringing to bear, I guess, all of his military training and that quick thinking decision that he made. And
working as a train driver for the last 7 years, I think, since 2018. And it's reassuring when you see and read about this horrific story that we've got people driving our trains who have that sort of background. And it's also reassuring more generally because you hope and imagine that there will be procedures in place for this sort of incident. It's reassuring that seems to have worked, as in prevented further casualties, and we hope prevent death as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the LNE are saying that, the quick thinking and the following of procedure to actually go to the nearest station rather than stop midway between, which would be more difficult for emergency service to get to, is absolutely the right thing to do, and procedure was followed. Just reading some of the detail, also quite shocking, the Daily Telegraph, train seats were soaked with blood during the attack, with scenes like something from a film. One witness saying that they initially thought it was a Halloween prank.
Yeah, absolutely. You can imagine you just don't expect this sort of thing to be happening. And as it was just Halloween or just after Halloween, people thinking that this surely couldn't be a real thing. And tragically, maybe people were not moving out of the way quick enough, but it turned out not to be.
I think one of the issues that this raises is how the general public and how all of us respond. And my plan would be to get on the next train that I'm scheduled to get on, and to make sure that fear doesn't reign, because there is a worry in these sorts of circumstances. I mean, I think back to 7/7. This incident is not being considered at the moment as a terrorist incident, is it? But 7/7, of course, was. And as a Londoner, you remember worrying a little bit about where you were on the train, having these sorts of thoughts, and you can't really afford to do that, because otherwise life grinds to a halt.
Yeah. But one of the witnesses that we spoke to in one of our reports was saying that she is very worried about getting on.
Which is
the train
understandable,
again.
of course, yeah.
It's such a traumatic experience. Which leads us to the eye and what, as you say, happens in future for people travelling on the trains. And police are going to certainly be patrolling that line and possibly other lines in the future. Phil?
That's really important to give reassurance, as we were saying. After an incident like this, people are going to be anxious, and so the police are there to give that reassurance, prevent any obviously copycat attacks or anything like that. And we want our trains and other public transport services to be places where you don't need to think about these things. I spend a bit of time in Israel where all the trains, all the bus stations, you have to go through airport-style security because of the security problems they have there. Obviously, we hope we don't get there, but in the short term, police there giving reassurance.
I mean, you suspect that this is only a temporary move, because you can't police all of the trains all of the time.
You can't. And as you say, I mean, we're used to security when we fly, if we do fly, but we're not remotely thinking, most of us, about security when we get onto public transport. And it's critical that everything is done that can be done and can be afforded to be done to make public transport as safe as possible. And when a horrific incident such as this happens, it will, of course, focus the minds of the authorities.
Do you think people will change their behaviour in terms of travelling on public transport now?
As I say, I hope not, because you can't live your life in fear. I think it was President Roosevelt in the 1930s who told Americans there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And that's been a principle of my life. But it doesn't mean that I don't have empathy for those who are frightened after this sort of attack.
Absolutely. And there's just a lot of these kind of terrifying things around. There was that stabbing incident in Uxbridge, wasn't it, just a few days ago. And what is happening, that there are these people who are, we don't know the motive here yet, but unwell or whatever, who are committing these acts. It's one following the other soon after, makes people anxious.
I think when something like this happens, whatever the motive, as I say, it's a chance for authorities to refresh their thinking and to make sure that they are doing everything they can do in the interests of public safety. I mean, you think when there's an air accident, you think that the next air accident is less likely because there's more information.
Yeah.
So it's critical that authorities look at this.
Yes, and it encourages a review, doesn't it, of systems. Let's have a look at The Guardian. Go back to The Guardian front page. This story regarding a British university complied with a demand from Beijing to halt research about human rights abuses in China. Tell us the detail of this story, Phil.
Well, this is very deeply concerning. There was research at Sheffield Hallam University about the situation in China, in the Xinjiang province, where the Uyghur population has been really brutally repressed. Some say suffering a genocide, but certainly a deeply, deeply concerning situation over there. And there was research being put into this, and apparently China, which had some degree of funding there, ordered that research to be stopped, and it was stopped. And this is really, really worrying. And we were talking about this before, and I think there's been some new provisions in the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme that requires universities to declare whether they're receiving foreign funding, and indeed to declare if they're being pressured by foreign countries, whether China, Qatar, others. And this is something we need to look at, whether there's foreign influence that's preventing research into things that really should be looked at.
We both saw this story at around the same time, and our reactions were very similar. They were outraged, weren't they, really? Because we do not want and cannot afford to have foreign powers, least of all a massive power in the shape of China, putting pressure on our academic institutions that has the effect, it seems, of changing what sort of research goes on at these institutions. This is not the first story in recent weeks or months of Chinese pressure on Britain, and there has to be a very clear line in the sand. It's perfectly reasonable to want to do trade with China, because if you don't trade with China, who else do you not trade with? We cannot only, it seems to me, trade with countries who share our human rights values, but it is very, very clear in my mind that our state, what happens within Britain, is completely free of this sort of influence and interference.
Just to the Chinese line, they reject accusations of forced labour and say that the Uyghurs' work programmes are for poverty alleviation.
You wouldn't really expect them to say anything else.
Just for the
They appear to have concentration camps in Xinjiang, and it's really deeply concerning what's going on there.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your thoughts on that story. We're going to take a break. Coming up, experts say high street clinics are giving pregnant mums unsafe scans. That's on the front page of the Metro. Stay with us for more.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents, based in Washington, D.C. Connor, what did you say to the President? What did you say?
He's had a great meeting with him. He's a great man.
David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that? Sky News in the UK, why do you think the President should intervene on Iran?
I think Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon is an acute threat to the national security of the United States.
Free wherever you get your news.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problems. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force. It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Phil Rosenberg, President of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and broadcaster and commentator Matt Stadlen. Let's have a look at the Financial Times front page. City bosses fear for hiring as minimum wage catches up with graduate salaries. So they're saying that city execs are warning that the minimum wage is bumping up against starting salaries for graduates at professional services firms, raising concerns about the impact on hiring in terms of, finance, law, accounting. So
the context for this is the imminent budget on the 26th of November. There's been so much speculation, hasn't it?
It's been imminent for a long time, hasn't it?
And so many kites have been flown. I don't think there's as many kites on Hampstead Hill on the Heath. But the context is the warnings come as the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is expected, it says here, in this month's budget to announce a 4% increase in the minimum wage. So that would be to £12.70 an hour. And that lifts the average salary, if it happens, of the minimum wage worker on a 40-hour week from £25,376 to £26,416. So that's not nothing. That's quite significant. And on the face of it, that's surely good news because the cost of living is very costly indeed. So the idea that some of our lower-paid workers are going to get this sort of boost seems to me fantastic. The worry is, according to this article at least, that the salaries then bump up against graduate salaries for sort of city law firms. And I find this a slightly odd look at it, because one of the city bosses has said, why would young people take on £45,000 of student debt if they can earn the same stacking shelves? Only the people who can afford to pay their way through university will be immediately incentivised to do so. Really? You would have thought that if you're going to spend your career stacking shelves, your salary won't rise that much, unless, of course, you go into senior management and so forth, and then more power to your elbow. Whereas if you go into a city law firm, quite quickly that starting salary, you imagine, would raise significantly.
But I suppose if you're talking about the starting salary at that starting point, then is it worth it to take out huge loans to study for a degree?
I think a lot of people will look long-term at their careers and say, what is my potential earning, not just in the first year, but going forward. And look, as you say, a rise in the minimum wage, and particularly given the cost of living crunch that so many people are facing, has got to be welcome news. And it does seem a bit sort of a far stretch. And I think some of these firms are probably just trying to avoid paying what they really ought to their workers.
I mean, more generally, people do make arguments that if you raise the minimum wage, that might disincentivise employers from employing as many people as they otherwise might or would. And I can't answer that question. But you might think that employers are incentivised to complain about a rise in the minimum wage, whatever. Whereas, as I said at the beginning, the cost of living, it's something that we come in and out of as political commentators, as broadcasters in talking about, but it is just relentless for millions of people and families up and down the country. The cost of day-to-day life is so high.
I suppose employers are thinking that they will have to now pay graduates much more when they start out with their firms if they're going to be earning the same as somebody.
I don't buy it myself. Do you buy it?
No. I mean, I think that's what they're arguing.
No, what happens when employers are not paying what is the actual cost of living is that they're asking the state to subsidise people who might be in full-time work because the state is having to step in and look after people who are working. So I think that's a bit rich coming from these employers.
Let's move on to the Metro. Matt, you take us into this story.
This is a shocking story.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. And not one that I've seen anywhere before. And this is high street scans, something that's becoming increasingly more popular because, especially with pregnancy scans, there are only two that you get on the NHS. But with these high street establishments, you can get as many scans as you like. But there is a cost, seemingly.
So to set the scene again, if you are a parent-to-be, you can sometimes be desperate to know more about what's happening with your baby, indeed to know the sex of your baby. So there's typically on the NHS a 12-week scan and then a 20-week scan. And it's not until, I think I've got this right, I'm a relatively recent double parent, but it's not until the 20-week scan typically that you would discover the sex of your baby. And quite understandably, lots of parents want to do that. But I think they also probably want to just keep an eye on the baby. It can be a very anxious time. It was certainly anxious for us. And what's being offered are alternative scans. So not on the NHS, you pay money and you can go to a high street store effectively to get this scan. And it's said here that anyone with an ultrasound machine can call themselves a sonographer, they say, even though other health professionals must be qualified and registered. Staff can be inexperienced, unqualified, or even have been struck off from a previous NHS role, according to this. And that's very concerning because it can lead to misdiagnosis, both good and bad, if you see what I mean. So something that is bad can be shown to be there when it isn't, and something that's good can be shown to be there when, in fact, it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, this is extremely worrying, isn't it, Phil? Because some of the areas include staff missing an ectopic pregnancy and also diagnosing that a baby was dead.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
Yeah, advising a mother to have an induced miscarriage when the baby was actually perfectly healthy. I mean, it is such a horrifying thing, as you say, this moment of, you know, where parents are anxious, parents to be anxious, and you expect that you're going to trust a professional who might be able to call themselves a sonographer, but actually they're not at all qualified, and probably rightly, therefore, the Society of Radiographers are saying we need to have better regulation around this. People can't just set themselves up and call themselves whatever if they're not actually qualified to be able to do so, which sounds to me very sensible.
Yeah.
What's not clear to me from what I can see of this piece so far is how widespread these horror stories are or not.
Yeah, but I mean, it does sound like something that needs to be addressed immediately.
You'd think it would be regulated, wouldn't you?
No, absolutely,
So.
absolutely. Back to the FT, US scuppers climate deal with heavy-handed tactics. Matt?
Yeah, well, this is a story that you picked out, actually, Phil, isn't it? And on the face of it, it's pretty serious and pretty scary because participants at a UN-backed net zero framework for global shipping at meetings in London, so right here, US officials allegedly were deploying bully boy tactics on other officials, I think, from African and Pacific and Caribbean island nations to drop support for the climate pact.
Yeah, they say it was like dealing with the mob, and it's really, really concerning. We see the effects of extreme weather, including in the United States, which is linked to climate change, man-made climate change. And here we have the United States trying to stop people taking action on that. And, you know, having seen the wildfires in America and indeed in these other countries where rising sea levels are making some of these island nations potentially uninhabitable in years to come, this seems to be a very...
Phil and Matt, thank you so much. We've run out of time, so sorry. We'll see you in the next hour.